And hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Haunted Histories. And that's my dog in the background. Haunted Histories with yours truly, Penny Griffiths Morgan. Now, last time I spoke to you, I was talking about the very mysterious House of Wills over there in Cleveland, Ohio. I do apologize for the dog. You don't ever work with animals or children, I tell you. But for this episode, I'm going to do something a little bit different. And I've pulled in, well, she is a historian, but she also bakes the most delicious cakes. But I'll be getting onto that one in a second. So what have I got going on? Well, I've just recently filmed, or I will be filming another episode of Help My House is Haunted. So for the next series that's coming out. So hopefully you guys will enjoy my little history slot on that. And also, don't forget, I'm going to be appearing at 2 Paracons this year in September. At the beginning of September, so the 1st to the 3rd, you've got the Parameet down there in Brownsover Hall. And for those of you who don't realise, that's actually where Frank Whittle used to live, the inventor of the jet engine. And for an aviation geek like me, I am like a pig in the proverbial. And also, a couple of weeks later, I'm going to be back at the Festival of the Unexplained. I am going to be back at the Festival of the Unexplained over there at Bosworth Hall. Yes, only 4 or 5 miles up the road from the site where Richard III, quite honestly, was murdered. The Battle of Bosworth Field. And I will be back there, and there are tickets available for both events still. And if anything else comes up, obviously you'll be the first to know. Right. On that note, my guest tonight, or today, whenever you're listening to this, is someone I met a couple of years ago. And we kept in touch because she is amazing and intelligent and beautiful. And I lust after her wardrobe. She has the most amazing style of dress. It is the one, the only, Mrs. Charlotte White.
Hi, Penny.
Hello, my darling. How are you?
I'm great. What an introduction.
Do you like that?
I feel like, I can't live up to it today because I'm in my running gear. I am going for a run later, everybody. You got to hold me to it. I'm going
But
to
you
do
still
it.
got red lips, even in your running
I,
gear.
right. Well, that's just for you. That's,
Oh, bless you.
that's just me
Mwah.
making an effort.
Mwah, mwah. Oh, no, your
What to
dress
you?
sense.
What to the listeners?
Your dress sense. I think I told my oldest son, I said, oh, I'm interviewing Charlie today. And he goes, which one's Charlie? I said, you met her. She came around the house. Oh, the one in the Russian hat. Yeah, that's her.
Yeah.
That's how we remember you, the Russian hat. The amazing fur
See,
hat.
I warn people all the time, Penny, and say, don't let your children watch old movies because they take it in like a sponge and they end up like me. I just want to dress like I'm in an old movie all the time.
But it looks amazing on you. You just look so
Thank you.
I love it. You post your outfits on Instagram quite regularly, and some of I think all of them I just look at and go, oh, that is so good. And the husband goes, why can't you dress like that? And I said, because I don't look like Charlie, and that much colour would scare me.
Well, yes, we both do lean towards the natural gothic
Definitely.
look, but you're not dissimilar. We're both hot blondes. What are you gonna do?
Well, there is that. There is that. But thank you very much
Plus,
for
you
that
have
one.
to be careful. You have to be careful because they say that, if the worst happens and you got hit by a bus, that's your ghost outfit
True,
forever.
true.
So,
But I'm normally all
you
in
figure if
black.
you're overdressed,
I'm normally all in
there you
black,
go.
and it's one of the jokes that ghost hunters only ever dress in black. Now, somebody did ask me once, well, why do ghost hunters only dress in black? And I said, it's because most of us, that's all we own. We don't go out and buy it specifically for ghost hunts. It's what we own. I'd actually have to go out and specifically buy non-black stuff. So I know I was always told as long as your underwear is clean, it's okay.
Lots of ghosts with very clean underwear. That's good to
Definitely.
know.
No, you and I met through, I think it was through Alex Churchill, wasn't it, that we first.
It was. So many of us in this community have Alex Churchill in common. She's one of those incredible women who chucks the ladder down to others.
Yeah.
And the number of people who've been involved with History Hack who've gone on to do just amazing things. There's so many. So yeah, big up to Alex, and that's where we met because you were a guest on History Hack. So I feel a little bit like the tables have turned here.
Yeah, I get to interview you, gamekeeper turned poacher, vice versa. Yeah, no, I agree with you about Alex. She's one of those, she is an incredibly giving person in that
Yeah,
I've never once had her say to me, well, I found that out, therefore you can go and find it out. If I've ever asked her something, she'll tell me not only the answer, but where she found it, how to find it, how to dig even deeper if I needed to.
yeah,
And she's never once laughed at me for the paranormal side, which some historians do. So
that's it.
and I adore her sense of humor, her sarcasm. It gets me. I can be as sarcastic as I like back and know that I won't offend
Oh
her.
yeah. It's funny you say about historians being snippy about the paranormal side because I think if if everyone was honest, anyone with any love of history, and if you've dedicated your life to the study of it and you're a historian, the chance to actually have a conversation with someone who's been long dead. Oh my God, I'm so open to all things paranormal because I tell you, if Charles II wanted to come and actually tell me some stuff and be like, no, 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 it wasn't like that. This is what happened. This is what I meant when I said that.
Yeah.
This is what I was intending to do when this happened. It would be incredible.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating that we can't have that. I'm jealous of all of the people who study periods of history that, frankly, I've got gloves older than, people who study the Second World War and the First World War, because they can actually see the people move, they can hear their voices. We've got recordings, we've got video evidence, all this amazing stuff that they take for granted. That if I could just have Charles walk in the room right now, just so I could see how he walked, I would be grateful. So I think the we can't be snippy about the paranormal at
The
all.
thing is, I mean,
We're
this is
just
one of
jealous.
it's one of the reasons I started Haunted Histories. One of them was because I was getting so fed up with history being made up by paranormal investigators, saying this is
Yeah,
all these people were murdered here. And it's like, when? Oh, in 1876 or whatever. And I'm like, 1876, it would be recorded if there were deaths there. There's nothing, and that's there's a few of us who do that in the paranormal world. That was part of the reason I set up Haunted Histories, to sort of dispel some of those and sort of say, well, look, the documented history
yeah,
says otherwise. But also because I wanted to prove to people who are paranormal people that history isn't all it's actually going to be quite useful to understand some of it.
yeah.
But also for historians to realize that not everyone who's into the paranormal is completely batshit crazy. Well,
I I think we all are a little bit on
um,
all sides of this spectrum, I think.
but what I
Yeah,
mean more is there is a science to it. There is sort of, we do, I mean, most of us will debunk more than we believe is paranormal. But then it's also explained to people, what does the paranormal mean? It doesn't mean ghost. It means something aside of normal, something that is not normal. And so many things happen that if you think about it, even just 100 years ago, stuff that we would now
yeah,
understand completely, why it's nature and why it happens and everything else, they would have thought it was paranormal. So
yeah,
it's I think once I can go and get that across, I can normally sort of have an intelligent conversation. And I find as well, because I can talk history, I sometimes
yeah,
do get a little bit more respect off the historians because I can talk about it on their level,
yeah,
especially if it's one of the eras that I do sort of specialize in. But I do think, I think it's quite naive to assume that there's the paranormal is just hoo-ha. Because
yeah.
like you say, if even if one of Charles II's, even if, I don't know, Barbara Villiers walked in and you say to her,
Oh,
how
don't.
come you never married Charles? How come you never demanded he divorce Catherine?
Oh my goodness.
Braganza, was it? Catherine of Braganza, was that the name of his wife?
Catherine of Braganza
Yeah.
was his wife. Yeah,
How
I
come
mean,
you never divorced
Barbara and
her?
I,
I mean,
oh,
how amazing would that be to have 5 minutes with, say, someone like Barbara Villiers or
I
one of
would,
Charles's advisors and sort of say, look,
yeah. I mean, the nice thing is, I mean, it's this is the constant source of frustration with his advisors, and with a lot of the men who are around. we actually have their opinion of what happens. And of course, we take things with a pinch of salt because people write down what they always have. They have a perspective when they are writing. Everybody has a bias. Everybody has a opinion, and that's what's written. With someone like Barbara, silence, because the women around Charles are silent. We have nothing. We don't have. We've got no. We've got hardly any letters. We've got no diaries. We've got nothing like that. And Barbara in particular, I adore this so much. Historians have used letters that she wrote, that we have, as a way of sort of determining her character. And the letters they use were ones that she wrote at the age of 17 to the Earl of Chesterfield, who was he was basically the only eligible bachelor in interregnum London. He still had his title, he still had a shit ton of money, and he's young and he's hot. Everybody wants to marry the Earl of Chesterfield and become his countess. So we've got a couple of letters that she wrote to him. But do we? What we actually have are her letters that she wrote to him that he has written from memory in a book. So we don't have her letters age 17 to a boy that she fancies. We have the boy's recollection of what she wrote to him when she was 17 years old. And if I am remembered in 400 years' time, not by, I mean, it'd be bad enough if I got judged by what I wrote to boys when I was 17 in 400 years' time, because I'm not going to come across well. But it would be even worse if those were written by the boy's recollection of what I said to him. And this is how she's judged. That is 400 years later. It's like Barbara was an incredibly powerful woman. She amassed a vast fortune and a lot of power and a lot of influence by being in the king's bed. But what we're doing when we're looking at the sources that we have on her is we're trying to write a straight biography of Hillary Clinton in 400 years' time using only Facebook. That's the analogy.
I like that. I like that.
Because they're silent. This is the problem, because the women are silent in the archives and stuff, and we only have these things to go. A lot of stuff Pepys wrote about her as well is really funny because he's conflicted because he doesn't approve of her, but he fancies her. So she comes across as a sort of beautiful tempest in Pepys, but we never get the real woman.
That's right. I've never thought of it like that. I mean, you know, I was going to say something like when I was at the archives recently, I was looking at what you were saying about documentation. It's one of the reasons why when I was trying to look up some 15th, 16th century stuff for the book I've just written, I was like, I'm never doing this era again. This is just, it makes my eyes hurt trying to read it, let alone trying to find, like, everything's like 200 years old and written in a chronicle 200 years later, and there's no primary, real, true primary stuff. And I think I was reading some the naval stuff, because it was to do with Epping Forest and them commissioning wood to be cut down, the forests of Waltham for boats and stuff. And I realized that the letter I was reading was actually sent to Samuel Pepys, and I was a bit kind of like, oh my God, Sammy, because I'd completely forgotten he was Admiralty, and then I'm just like, this Samuel Pepys touched this letter, and looking at this letter thinking, oh my, and that's the extent of my sort of 17th century sort of embracing, and then sort of looking, right, when was this written? 1667. Oh, Charles II. Oh, and it's that's, but if you suddenly discovered a letter that was written by Barbara Villiers, I mean, I know we didn't discuss this beforehand, but would she have been literate? Would she have been literate?
She was, and what's wonderful about it is because the 17th century are very, let's say they're fluid with things like punctuation and spelling, which is a constant source of frustration. Anyone trying to look up anybody in archives, because you need to think of every possible way of misspelling their name. But we don't have many things. But what we have of her, and one thing I really, really love, is we've got a really scratchy letter that she's written to Thomas Clifford, who is he's the treasurer at the time. He's the money guy, and she's written him this really scratchy letter, which doesn't necessarily indicate that she had poor penmanship, but that she was lazy and she wanted to get this letter out to him quickly. And she basically says something along the lines of, look, I wouldn't have spent all this money on my house if I hadn't thought that my money would be forthcoming from you, which is basically, give me my money now. I need money to pay my bills. And this is very much Barbara. But one of the things that is mentioned that I adore is that she misspells the word certainly, and it's spelled certainly.
Okay.
And it's suggested that with a lot of the misspellings, you can actually hear people's accents.
Yes, because
So
they spell
maybe she would have said
phonetically.
certainly instead of certainly,
Mm.
which again, we don't know, but I love that as a way of knowing her. And I've only got this letter of hers because it was auctioned off in a huge job lot of Clifford's letters at Sotheby's. And they printed them all in a catalogue, and I bought the catalogue off eBay. I've
Oh,
got a few of her, just that one, just where she's getting very upset. She'd had a very large, very elaborate fountain installed in her home, Cleveland House, named after her when she was Duchess of Cleveland. And on the hour it played the Lily Bolero, which I just love. I love knowing that about her. She's
well, I mean, people might have guessed we're talking Charles II on this podcast,
yes,
various things about Charles II. And one of the reasons
huzzah.
I chose Charles II to talk to, well, Charlie about, there is is I mentioned earlier that my friend Charlie here is not only a historian, she's also a very, very talented baker. And her business is called
Da, 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 da. Restoration cake.
she also, because this is audio, you won't see it, she also has a Charles II tattoo. That's how much she, well, loves, is that the wrong word? Charles II.
Yeah,
We
we move
end up
on.
talking either Richard III or Charles II normally when we start guessing. So I thought, well, Richard III, a lot of people talk about. And to be honest, I couldn't follow talking to Matt Lewis about Richard III. I don't think,
He is the guy.
that would be like, I don't know, having John Waite cook you a meal and then going to McDonald's for afters. I mean, you know, you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so you've got a business called Restoration Cake. So you've always had a bit of a thing about Charles II. Now, be honest with me, was it a bit of a crush?
It's much more deep and awful than that. So okay.
Go on,
Okay.
tell
Paging
us your
Dr. Freud.
inner secrets, please.
Okay. I'm lying on a couch right now. This is therapy for me. So I grew up I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, and my dad owned a music shop, and it was full of smoke. I just remember it was a small room full of cigarette smoke and full of musicians. And all the musicians would be wearing very tight jeans, leather jackets, and all had long flowing hair.
Oh, sounds like my era.
All See, all I can imagine is that maybe my love of the Cavalier gentleman and of Charles II may stem from all the guys who hung around with my dad. So it's
Okay.
probably a real paging Dr. Freud. But it honestly, and I've spoken about this before, it really started for me at school when we did Tudors and Stuarts,
Mm-hmm.
and we were told that Charles I put on an extra vest on the day that he was executed so he wouldn't shiver and look scared.
I heard
And
that story. Yeah.
I'm a hyper empathizer. What am I going to do? It really touched me. I must have been about 9. I wasn't very old at all. And it just stuck with me. And I always thought that was a terrible thing. Went to college, did my history A level, and that was in the Civil War. Found it fascinating and just kind of wanted to know what happened next. And started reading around, you know, Civil War, the interregnum. I've always loved the story of Charles II in exile, which I know we're going to talk about. And I just kind of fell in love with the man. He's an enigma. He's such a wonderful um, vessel for sort of the time in which he's written about. He's been sort of variously held up and admired and looked at with side eye for being just a terrible, terrible man throughout history. And I find him incredible. I think he was exactly the man we needed at that time
Hmm.
because he was malleable and he was easygoing. So he was the perfect heel and settle monarch.
Okay.
Um, I love that he gets called the Merry Monarch and that people think that that's a term of endearment. Because would you like to hear the poem from which that term comes?
Oh, yes.
Would you like to hear it? This is the end of a longer poem,
Yeah, well,
but
yeah.
content warning. It was written by John Wilmot, second Earl of Rochester. He
Right.
is a little bit of a filth merchant, and I love him. But the term comes from this. Restless he rolls about from whore to whore, a merry monarch, scandalous and poor. So
Okay.
it's
Well,
not necessarily saying good things.
we are gonna get on to his I think one of his doctors said his habit of rutting um in a minute. But that's, I mean, it's, yeah, it's interesting what influences you as a kid that then
Yeah,
you can take further as an adult, and it kind of becomes you. I mean, mine has always been workhouses have fascinated me since I was sort of little. And
yeah,
now I've sort of learned Victoria, well, they say Victorian, but it actually came in before Victoria. But anyway, by the that's I got told off for splitting hairs when I said that to someone recently.
yeah.
Um, but I've always been fascinated by those since I was a small child, and unfortunately I never got to study them at school, which is probably why I flunked my history A level because it was so boring. I would have been quite interested in the Civil War, but it was more
Yeah,
rote learning because I'm sort of 10 years older than you. It was rote learning of dates and what happened on this date and what
yeah,
policy was her. There was no, it didn't come to life, if that makes sense. Whereas when I try and talk history to people, I try and bring it to life for them so they can empathize and be in that person's shoes. So
yeah,
if I was talking about Charles the First to the kids, I would sort of show them that window that he's meant to have stepped out
yeah,
of and said, now, can you imagine how you would have felt knowing you're about to be executed, scared? Well, yes, he didn't want to appear scared. He wanted to appear brave. So that he didn't shiver, he wore an extra vest, like he put an extra coat on so that he would look.
yeah.
And that's how I'd explain it to them. So, but unfortunately, that's not how history was taught to me at second at A level anyway. It was at sort of O level standard. But
Yeah.
I just think it's amazing how things can influence us. Now, obviously, Charles the Second, son of Charles the First.
Mhm.
Um, I was always led to believe that Charles the First, and again, this isn't my a period of expertise at all. One of the
Uh-huh.
reasons he was executed is because he was seen to be too frivolous, too much of a party boy. Um,
Yeah,
he wanted to control things too much, and he didn't really have the mental acumen to do so. Um,
yeah,
and then here comes Charles II, who's nicknamed the Merry Monarch, although not necessarily
yeah.
for the right reason. Who, when you look at his whole appearance, it's very grand. Like you say, it's the long flowing curls, the amazing outfits. And we'll talk
Yeah.
about him being a ladies' man in a minute. But I've always been led to believe Charles I, bad, Charles II, good.
Okay.
How accurate is that?
Well, I mean, look, we're talking about real people here,
Mm.
and no one is entirely one thing at all. Charles the First, a lot of his personality led to his downfall. If he'd have been more willing to negotiate with his parliament after the end of the First Civil War, so after
Yeah.
the massive defeat at Naseby, and that eventual sort of clicking down of events that leads to the obliteration of the royalist cause. If he'd have been more willing to negotiate, give up some powers
Yeah.
in favour of his parliament, then he wouldn't have lost his head. I don't think that anybody thought at that point that 1645 they were going to execute the king 4 years later. Nobody thinks that that's going to happen.
No.
So he Charles the First is he's very much a believer in his divine right to rule,
Mm.
and he doesn't think that he should have to give away any part of himself whatsoever. And he ends up giving away a very big part of himself, his head.
Mm.
So Charles II, his son, it's wonderful. When they've got Charles I coming out to be executed that morning, Parliament scrabbles together and think, we've got a bit of a problem here, because what's the first thing that happens when a king dies? People say, the king is dead, long live the king, and a new king is proclaimed. So they dismantle the whole system of monarchy. It's obliterated in paper, so that when King Charles I is executed, that his son will not be proclaimed King Charles II. But nobody sends this memo to Scotland. Scotland's running a few days behind on the news because, no social media. It's kind of crap. They don't get the news that the king has been executed until a few days later. And they are absolutely furious. They've not been consulted on this. This is not what they wanted. They immediately proclaim King Charles II King of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
This will become a problem for Charles later, because England and Scotland, it's always a tricky relationship at that time, very much so. So Charles II is removed, and he's off in exile. He bums around Europe for, essentially it's 11 years. He's bouncing around from place to place, because as the Commonwealth becomes the protectorate later, you've got Oliver Cromwell in charge. England's becoming quite a powerful country. The Navy's doing really well. They're making alliances here and there, fighting wars here and there. People are having to make deals with England, and part of those deals include, please don't harbour a fugitive called Charles Stuart. So he's again bouncing around. He goes from France, he goes to the Spanish Netherlands, which is now Belgium. He goes to The Hague, he goes to Bruges and has a little bit of a party there, and he's bouncing around. But in terms of him being sort of more good than his father, when he does eventually back to the throne, he comes back to a parliament that is forever changed. It's been running its own thing for a long time, and when they finally decide in 1660 that they're going to bring back Charles II, this is after the death of Oliver Cromwell, and the protectorate eats itself after him. He was very much the glue that was holding everything together.
Well, part of it as well, wasn't it? The whole point of getting rid of a hereditary monarchy was so that you could decide who was going to be running things. And with Cromwell, his son Richard takes over, and it's like a question of, well, hang on, isn't this just having a monarch, except they've not got any royal heritage? And the Richard wasn't his father at the end of the day, was he?
And that was a problem for the army, and the army were not. He didn't have control of the army. Richard Cromwell. They loved Oliver. He was one of them. He was their general, and he could at least be seen to be acting for them. When Richard Cromwell takes over, the army want him very much to do what they want to do, perhaps more than his father would. And this is the problem with the protectorate. And you have two factions. You've got sort of a more realistic faction of saying, okay, that we fought this war, now we have to govern. This is a tricky thing, and this involves compromise. And then you've got the other side of the coin, which tends to be within the army, which is more extreme, often more religious perspective, which says, no, this is what we fought for, this is what we died for, these are our ideals, this is what will happen. And they never quite managed to resolve that. In the 11 years they couldn't resolve that tension. And Oliver was the only person holding it all together. Once he's gone, the two factions start fighting, and it eats itself. I genuinely think that's the best way of describing it. It eats itself, it falls apart. You end up with a Christmas period of absolute anarchy, where you've got effectively no parliament whatsoever, because army have chased them out. And there's rioting in the streets of London. It's really bad. And that only then changes when a parliamentarian general by the name of General Monk comes down from Scotland, and he says, look, okay, we're going to sort things out. And he puts a parliament back in, who are known as the Rump, which we love that name. He puts them back in, and effectively they then vote to restore the monarchy because they figure this is the only thing that's going to stop this absolute shit show of factions fighting each other. They need someone, they need a figure because they've lost Cromwell. And you know, of all that, I'm not a fan, but of all the things I can say for him, he was a fantastic figurehead for people to rally around and to give their loyalty to. And that's what was needed. They needed a king. And it turned out that the only person they could agree on who should be king was the king. So they restore the monarchy, and they go to Charles and they say, look, okay, this is the deal. We want you to come back. We want you to come back as king. You will be reigning in your own right. We'd very much like you not to take revenge on everybody who's ever fought against you and your family and killed your dad. And he says, okay, well, I will forgive everybody except the people who signed my father's death warrant.
Who committed regicide. Regicide, yeah.
Regicide. I think Reg. But that's when he comes back. The Parliament are clever because they don't restore all of the rights of the monarch. He still can't levy his own taxes without the assent of Parliament, without that being voted. They've still got rid of the Star Chamber, which was another higher sort of part of the court. He can't raise an army, so he's more limited than any monarch before him ever was. And because he was malleable, because he was easygoing, that worked. And because of that, we still have a monarchy today. Which I think that if we hadn't had Charles II, if we'd have perhaps gone instead to his brother James, who was much more absolute, much more like his father, much more rigid and unmovable, I think it may not have washed.
Well, James was also a Catholic, wasn't he? Wasn't he Catholic?
James was a Catholic.
Yeah.
Charles.
No, I know. I'm going to come on to Charles, the Catholic. Charles.
But the difference, the difference between them is that James just would not hide it. I mean, for years before he came out effectively as a Catholic, and before people knew that, oh my goodness, the heir to the throne is Catholic, he had priests going in and out of his apartments and stuff. Everybody knew that James was a Catholic, and he would go to Anglican services only very grudgingly, and then there'd be times he wouldn't turn up at all. And everybody knew it was the worst kept secret at court. But when he comes out in 1674, I think, with the Test Act, where he's effectively forced to reveal that he's Catholic, but he didn't have to. He could have just, again, it's this need. It's him being unmovable, and him being, perhaps we can admire it. Perhaps we can admire his sense of conviction. I think Charles gets a lot of stick for being faithless and for being, he'll say one thing to one person and say one thing to another person.
That's what I was going to mention, because there was,
that's governing.
Yeah, their mum was Catholic. Henrietta Maria was Catholic.
Yeah.
And then, Charles gets ripped away from it all at 16. So he's going to be
very... he's younger.
Was he younger than that? I thought was he 14 when he was ripped away? But he's at that age where he can be manipulated by his mum. So if his mum using, Catholic terminology, that's what he's going to hear. He marries when he got married. Now, one of the things about Charles that I was quite kind of shocked by, not shocked in a kind of, oh, how dare he way, but surprised. I didn't think the number was quite this high, was how many affairs he had, or how many mistresses he had.
Yes.
Because he married a lady by the name of Catherine of Braganza, Catholic.
Yeah.
She was a Catholic.
Yeah.
Portuguese? Was she Portuguese?
Portuguese.
Yeah. Oh, I remembered it. I'm not even looking at my notes, and I remembered it. I'm quite proud of myself.
No, you're doing great.
He marries Catherine of Braganza. It's kind of an arranged marriage and everything else. Unfortunately, she has repeat miscarriages, stillbirths. She can't have a child to term. In the meantime, he's got 5 kids with Barbara Villiers, who we mentioned earlier. He's had, is it 2 with Nell Gwyn? I think
Yeah.
they reckon, isn't there 13, at least 13 illegitimate children that he actually, but the thing is with him that I found almost, it's either bragging at, oh, look how fertile I am, or it's actually being a nice guy. He the opposite of disowning them. He acknowledged all of these illegitimate children, gave them titles, gave them functions to kind of, it's almost like set them up in life,
Yeah.
which I actually think is quite, he never once seemed to, I know there's a couple, it was like, were they, weren't they his? Because there's something else I read is a lot of the mistresses, they were passed around. I mean, you mentioned about Barbara Villiers and Sam Pepys actually fancying Barbara Villiers. I did read a few accounts of certain mistresses, that they would accommodate whoever wanted to be accommodated at the time, and I am not judging if that's what they want to do. I'm
Right. Yeah.
all for it. Um, so there was a couple, I think, who they weren't sure if it was Charles's kid or not, but the one they were, the fact that he acknowledged all these children and gave them titles and therefore property and acknowledgement, and
Yeah.
I think that's a positive thing. Whereas I suppose some people might think he should have pretended they didn't exist.
I think he was, I think he, for all of his philandering, I actually think he was a really good dad. And I'll back this up. I'll back this up. So when Catherine of Braganza comes over and they get married, he's just elevated his eldest illegitimate son,
Mm-hmm.
James. He was known as James Crofts at the time, but he's elevated him to the position of Duke of Monmouth.
Mm-hmm.
That is huge. He's 14, he's only 14 years old. So he's incredibly young to be given such a title. And he is illegitimate, but
Yeah.
he is the king's and the king loves him. Now, James, the Duke of Monmouth, was born while Charles was in exile to a woman called Lucy Walter.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucy came from a middling sort of family. She wasn't aristocracy by any sense of the word, but she wasn't a commoner. And they met in exile. They had a romance, and James was born. And then politics starts to get in the way. Lucy becomes a bit of a liability. Because there's a problem. There's sort of allegations that she's sort of drunk and misbehaving, and that there's issues. Their relationship ends, and she shacks up with some other guy who, again, it's not looking good. It's not a particularly good PR situation. So Charles has James taken away from his mother. And by all accounts, and anybody with sort of even a degree of empathy at all, this is horrific. She's tracked down. She's basically hunted across Europe. She's found in Paris. Her son is taken away from her. And a few years later, she dies on the streets of Paris. I mean, I'm making it sound like a scene out of Les Mis. But she dies alone and abandoned. Now, that is an awful story. But I tell you what, Charles never does that again. And every single mistress that he has, every single one of them is looked after. Even when he's done with Barbara Villiers, and she's not an easy woman. She's a feisty, difficult woman. She's a nasty woman. I love that term. She's a nasty woman. She's not yeah. So even when he's done with her, she's still around. She's still in court. She has to go off to France for a while just to kind of be out of the way, because she's a Catholic. He has way too many Catholics around him. That's a whole other thing. But she's with him the night that he dies, having dinner along with another one of his mistresses, and he
Louise.
looks after
Louise. Louise.
yes, Louise de Kerouel, or Lady Carwell, as the English called her, because it was much easier. He looked after them all. So Louise, of course, she was in the palace. She had rooms. She was very much his sort of chief mistress at that time. Even Nell Gwyn, she has a very comfortable life for a girl from, we don't even know where Nell Gwyn came from. Nell didn't even know where Nell came from. But she had a lovely home. He gave titles to both of her children. Sadly, one of them died quite young, but he he looked after them all. They were all given titles. They were all given advantageous marriages into the aristocracy.
Mhm.
And through that line, this is what I love. So here's some genetics for you. Through the line of Barbara Villiers and Charles II and their second son, William, our Prince of Wales, will be the first descendant of Charles II to sit on the throne
Really?
since Charles. Yeah, through the
Oh, yeah.
Spencers. The Spencers are a lot of the sort of very, very well um, posh families in this country. A lot of them have some claim of descent to a line of Charles II because he did populate. He really did populate, but not with his wife.
Yeah, she
Not
couldn't
with
have
his wife.
any. But that's the other
She could,
thing about him that I thought, deserves recognition, although you could argue it both ways. That when, after a while, when Catherine still hadn't been able to produce an heir,
yeah,
his advisors were like, you've got to get rid of her. You've got to marry someone else. You've got to marry someone who can give you an heir. And he said
yeah,
no. Now,
it, yeah,
did he say no because he didn't want to seem bad to the public that he divorced his wife and does what basically what Henry VIII did in
yeah.
you know or does he genuinely care for her, just not in a romantic way?
Not
Or
in
is
an
there another
exclusive
reason?
way.
Well, yeah.
It's
Or is there another reason
it's
why he wouldn't divorce her?
do you know what I would love to again I would love to ask him. We can only speculate. Of course, he should have divorced Catherine. He should have divorced her very quickly when there was no sign of a pregnancy. So it takes a very long time for there even to be any sign of pregnancy. And then yes, miscarriages, no stillbirths. There was no there
Oh,
were
I thought
no
there was, right.
there were no babies that could be
Right.
definitively said that was a baby that was lost. It was all very, very early stage losses. So she may not even have ever been pregnant if she was. It's awful. And again,
Mm.
we don't have a lot of actual information about this. We know that she gets very ill with a fever at one point, very early in their marriage. I think 1660. I want to say 1663, 1664, but don't hold me to that. She gets very ill and is, on her deathbed. Charles is with her every single day by her bedside,
Mm.
and she's delirious and she's ranting about, the children that she has and that there aren't
No,
any
yeah,
children.
and doesn't he tell her that yes, they have had children or something to calm her
Yeah,
down? Mm.
that's what we have, that he was sort of very comforting to her in that way. But he spent the evenings having dinner with Barbara. So, you know, again, you can say that that's a traumatic time to be watching a woman in such a state, and to have someone that you can go to in the evening who is going to look after you and take your troubles off your shoulders is a good thing. But of course, you can also look at it and go, well, he was sat by his wife's bedside in the day and off bonking his
What a
mistress at
cad,
night.
what a
So there's
cad, and all that
so
kind of.
that's what I love about Charles. I mean, I read it the first way. I think that he was actually I think he was a caring soul. And again, I feel so bad because if my husband was um, shagging left, right, and centre, I wouldn't be saying, well, he's lovely to me. I would not be having that at all. And, in a modern sort of situation with Princess Diana, she was not prepared to put up and shut up while the heir to the throne had affairs.
Yeah,
Yeah, 400 years earlier, she would have put up and shut up, and that because that was what was expected.
expected.
Um, but yeah, Catherine, he should have divorced her. Why didn't he divorce her? Right, okay, maybe he cared for her. Maybe he loved her in his way.
Mm.
He certainly didn't want to send her back to Portugal because her brother, who was king at the time, was known to be a very cruel man. And it wouldn't have been nice if Catherine had been sent back in any kind of disgrace. It would not have been good for her. Um, but also, he was being told to divorce his wife by Parliament.
Mm.
And I don't think he took very kindly to being told who he should or shouldn't be married with, who he should or shouldn't have in his bed. That was his kingdom. That was his domain. You don't get to tell me who I sleep with.
Mm.
And there's a part of me that thinks that it may have been a certain amount of being stubborn, because politically he should have divorced her, especially around the time of the Popish plot later on in his reign, where Catholics are under such suspicion, and it's a horrible time. It's like a witch hunt of Catholics. Um, and he should have divorced her because if you look at the primary function of the monarchy, of a monarch, it is to survive and to ensure its survival. So he should have,
Yeah.
when it was very clear that he was not the problem, he should have married someone else who could have given him a legitimate heir who could have taken the throne from him. And he should have done it early. But then nobody knows when they're going to die, you know.
No.
But he should have done it, and he should have done it quick.
I wonder if part of it though is it was almost his way. The fact that he had to, forgive Parliament for a lot of the things they did beforehand
Mhm.
to his. And not all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
He did hunt down the people who survived and who were still in England who signed, for want of a better term, his father's death warrant. He did hunt them
yeah,
down.
yeah,
And a lot of them were executed as for treason. Um,
yeah.
so he wasn't quite as happy-go-lucky as people think. He was
Oh no,
he was annoyed about that, and he was going to get. But I wonder if, because of some of the traditional monarchy rules have been taken away from him, and I actually think the ones they took away were good. I think, I always find it hilarious that medieval kings had to raise an army and pay for it themselves. So how are they going to pay for it? Oh, let's just whack some tax on the peasants. Who needs food? Who they don't need to eat. I think the fact that it was controlled more from a central sort of logical perspective was a good thing. I mean, you could go back as far as Simon de Montfort, because he was trying to change the way things were ruled and monarchy power and everything sort of
yeah,
500 years before that, 400 years before that. But where was I going with this? But I don't think, I just wonder if some of it was his way of sticking his fingers up to Parliament, metaphorically speaking, and
yeah,
saying, I do have some control. I do have some
yeah,
power. I'm still bloody king. And
yeah.
and
I think
I,
you're
I
right.
like to think he did care. I think he loved women. I think he loved women. And we all know men like that who they don't necessarily jump into bed with every woman they meet, but they love being around women. They
Yeah,
they they were and because the other thing is a lot of the women he was around, they weren't shy and retiring little wallflowers. I mean, mostly if you ask mistresses, now Gwyn is the one that most people mention, which I was
yeah.
quite interested when I started researching this, like the fact that Barbara had 5 kids, yet nobody ever mentions her. But the one that really blew my mind was Hortense Mancini. I mean,
Ah, yes.
this woman, if you've never heard of her, go and just look at Wikipedia, just Google this.
Yeah,
She, I mean, apparently back in, I think it was 1659, he originally proposed to her when he was still in exile. And her uncle,
yeah,
who was a cardinal, said, no, he's got no prospects.
yeah.
Oh, that was a bad
It's
thing.
it's fantastic.
Cardinal Mancini. And they married her off to this guy who, Armand Charles, who was 14 years
Yeah.
older than her. And mad as a box of frogs, this man.
He's
She has her first.
insane.
He was an arsehole. She has her first child, I think, at 16. I worked it out, 16 or 17.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, he. I mean, I don't know if you know any more of these things about him. It's no wonder. I mean, the fact that she actually did a runner from him and was sheltered by other people. This is how much of an arsehole this guy was. He thought he
Yeah,
didn't like people milking cows because he thought the udders were sexual.
yeah,
He would knock out his maid's front teeth to make them less
yeah.
attractive. And people think, what? blooming Countess Bathory did to her maids was bad. He'd knock them at the front teeth. He would take very expensive works of art and either scratch off the bits he thought were rude or paint over them. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy is cuckoo.
He's insane. And when we talk about him and Hortense as a couple, she's a star at the French court. Her uncle, Cardinal Mazarin, is basically he's like the top dog at French court other than the king. And this is Louis the 14th. She's a star. Everyone loves her. She's part of a family of sisters. I think there's 4 or 5 of them. They are the Kardashians. Let's just put that out there.
You know what I thought? The Gabors.
Sisters.
They reminded me of the Gabor sisters.
Yeah. Okay, I was being a little bit less highbrow with that, but yeah, they are the sisters. They are the stars of the court. And when he marries Hortense, he's suddenly overcome by paranoia that, of course, she's going to be shagging around. And so he takes her out of the court where she's this star and takes her to his estate where she's isolated completely, surrounded by maids with no teeth, unmilked cows. He is so sexually repressed.
And she's a child. She's basically a child.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's awful whenever you look back at this time and you look at the ages of people. And you also look at when you start looking into the pregnancies of married women who are essentially pregnant the whole time. It's unbelievable. But yeah, she's isolated. She gives him his heir. She's sent off at one point for bad behavior. He sends her to a convent, and it just so happens that she's put in a convent with another naughty girl who's been sent away by her family for similar reasons, a girl called Sidonie, and they become like the scourge of the nuns. Like they flood this one novice's bedroom and they put ink in the font. They're lovely. They're lovely little shits. I love these two. They're teenage girls running around causing the nuns so much trouble that eventually the nuns say to their families, "Will you please take these girls back?" So that's Hortense. She writes several times to King Louis and says, "I can't stay here. He's insane. He's threatening me. He takes away all of her clothes so that she won't run away." It's that level of abuse. And Louis writing back and saying, "Look, French law, your husband is king. I'm sorry, I can't intervene, even though I know he's insane. Can't do anything." So in the end, her brother comes for her with a horse, and she dresses in men's clothing because she nicks them off her husband. She puts his clothes on, and she rides away back to Versailles. Sorry, it probably wasn't Versailles at that point. It was probably the Louvre. So she goes back to the French
Paris.
court,
Paris.
Yeah. She shacks up with a duke, and she's there for a while, and then she's effectively enticed over to England to come see Charles. Yeah, she becomes his lover there. But
sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say she brings over a lot of art and culture. Her salons are legendary in England. She gathers the greatest minds, poets, artists, scientists all together, and all milling about. And her apartment's like the most fashionable. But her husband does get his own back in the end when she dies, and he comes to collect her body. And essentially kind of parades it on this slow parade back to Paris. And it's all creepy.
It's quite sad that he survived till he was in his 80s. It would have been nice to see him go through a painful death at about 45, to be quite honest. But yeah, I mean, she's the kind of person I'll start reading up more on, because I found her fascinating. It doesn't surprise me that her husband did that to her. He's I say batshit is about the only word I can think of to describe him. But she was an intelligent woman, like you say. She had the salons and salons in those days weren't what we'd think of as salon now as a beauty salon. They were sort of conversation groups, weren't they? And opportunities for people to get together and talk about subjects. The sort of thing I'd be in seventh heaven. I think we need to bring those back. I think we
I
need
think we should bring back salons, definitely.
maybe we could do a joint haunted histories history hack type salon.
I
Mm.
think that's a great idea. I think History Hack would be well up for a salon. It'd be
I think
great.
we should have a word with Alex about this, have it as a joint venture. But obviously she had that interest in science, which was actually something that Charles had a huge interest in. So what I said about him loving women, he obviously loved the carnal side, but he obviously enjoyed the pillow talk, like the intelligent pillow talk.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. I mean, he's the king. He can he can sleep with anybody he wants.
Yeah.
That's fine. He's got carte blanche. He's got a crown. He's the dude. But he did choose to surround himself with intelligent women, and like I say, difficult women like
Yeah.
Barbara. Louise was incredibly difficult. She was she was wonderful, and Louise was spying for the French king, and Charles knew it. And I don't think he was ever particularly worried. There wasn't. He was a fairly open book to Louis anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but she was difficult. Nell was wonderful. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we love Nell so much, and why she's still very much his most remembered
Mm.
mistress, is the way that she was quick-witted and she was funny. And she was pelted with fruit and excrement and stuff, and shouted at as her carriage was coming in. She rolled down the window and said, please, people, peace, I am the Protestant whore, because they'd been meaning to throw things at Louise. Um, and she called Charles her Charles III, because she'd had two lovers called Charles before him.
I
Um,
like it.
she was a funny woman. Apparently, she got a title for her son by calling him to see his father when Charles came round and saying, come here, you little bastard, come here, bastard." And Charles is absolutely horrified. "Don't speak to my son like that." She said, "Well, what else am I to call him?" And so he gives him an earldom. It's So she was funny, but his mother was difficult. Henrietta Maria was not a woman who just sat and let life happen to her. She was incredibly forceful. She was very domineering. She tried, especially when they were all in exile, she tried to rule her son,
Mm.
and Charles very quickly did not let that happen. He was very forceful with her. And one of the things that he was forceful with his mother about was her Catholicism,
Yeah.
because it was very much a deal when she was married to Charles I, when she came over to marry him, it was in their arrangement that she would be allowed to practice Catholicism
Yeah.
privately, quietly, with all the dignity, and all the she had a beautiful chapel made. It wasn't sort of, she had to do it quietly in the corner where no one could see. She had a proper, the whole full 9 yards, but it was done behind closed doors, and didn't affect her marriage, didn't affect anything along those lines. And she wasn't allowed to bring up her children Catholic, because these were heirs to the throne, and
Yeah.
they couldn't be Catholic. When they were all in exile, she tried to force her son Henry, her youngest son Henry, Duke of Gloucester. She tried to force him to convert to Catholicism, and some of the letters that we have that she wrote to him, or that have been seen, are incredibly manipulative, awful. I mean, really trying to force this young teenage boy to recant his Protestantism and to convert to Catholicism. And Charles has to step in and remove his brother, because he knows that any sniff of Catholicism in their family will be a problem to them getting home. Um, James, of course, is a whole other kettle of fish.
Middle
He's,
child. Middle child
middle
syndrome.
child syndrome, middle and spare syndrome. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at the relationship between Charles and James is
Isn't it amazing how history
fascinating.
repeats itself so much?
Oh, more than
You shall say
more than you
no
know.
names. No names.
More than you know.
The other thing about
But
Charles
yeah,
II, he does seem to be a bit of an action hero, because one of
yeah,
the first things I learned, I mean, obviously he went through, he had the Great Plague, which was
yeah.
pretty awful. And then 12 months later, you got the Great Fire of London, which he's got to deal with. And he was actually in the bucket chain trying to help put out the fire. I mean, it makes me think actually the sort of thing that I could see Prince William doing.
Yeah.
You know, if there was a fire at Buckingham Palace, I can see Prince William actually, and Kate, to be quite honest, standing there in the line with the buckets with everyone else.
Well, we saw, I mean, anyone who studies this time and who knows this episode of Charles's life, he's down there with James, both of them, periwigs off, they wore their hair shaved underneath their periwigs. So there would have been these two sort of very ordinary looking guys in beautiful outfits, helping with the effort to save London. And I think we saw the echo of that when Prince William went down to comfort the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire.
Yeah.
Because at that point, no politician had dared show their face. Yeah. And frankly, I don't think they should have gone down there and they should have taken the abuse from those people, because they deserve to know what had gone wrong. But William was down there, and they were helping in any way they could, but really they were just comforting. And that, to be seen, I think, is important to people, to know that they're seen.
Yeah, I can see the
seeing William down there. Amazing. Yeah, because Charles was down there. James was very much leading the effort to save the city. Someone needed to be there to make the executive decisions, and a lot of it involved they needed to pull down people's houses. And of course, people are saying, well, there's nothing wrong with my house isn't on fire. And you're having to explain to people, no, I'm sorry, your house has to come down because we've got to stop the fire. And that's a hard thing for anyone to hear. So James is leading the effort. Charles is down there with bread and with coins, and he's giving people coins as a promise that he will rebuild their homes. Which after the fire, of course, he did. After the fire, he has some fantastic plans for the city. Christopher Wren draws up a load of plans, and they think about modernising. But in the end, they can't modernise in the way that they would want to, because, of course, people have their property, their land, that you have to kind of put back where it was. So in the same way as London wasn't modernised after the Blitz, parts of it very much are still, it's built along the same way as it was. It's kind of gone that same way at that time.
I just think he's amazing in that he did try, but he had, I mean, his weakness could have been the fact that he enjoyed women's company a bit more than just for conversation. But then again, he did do right, in my view, by those women. We don't know that Catherine didn't turn around to him and say, look, I know I can't give you an heir. We're not sexually compatible. You're highly sexed. Therefore, and as you say, it was so expected of a monarch to jump into other beds that if you married one, you would have probably been quite naive to think they would have been completely and utterly. I don't think there's been a male monarch completely and utterly faithful, to their wife, ever. It's just not expected. But he died young. He was only 55 or 54, 55 when he died. And there were rumours that it was, unsurprisingly, syphilis and all that kind of thing. Yet there was I know you didn't watch it, but there was a fascinating programme that a friend of yours was on as a consultant, wasn't there? Rebecca.
Yeah, Rebecca Rideal was on a programme about the royal autopsy. I just couldn't watch it because I can't watch medical things.
Yeah, I love that
know this
stuff. I should have been a doctor, I reckon, because I love that kind of thing. But they did a theoretical, Professor Alice Roberts was on there, and they did a theoretical post-mortem on him. And although a lot of the information was, I kind of knew it anyway, especially researching for this, they decided that it was kidney disease that killed him.
Interesting. Yeah.
But my personal theory is that he developed kidney disease because of the chemicals he was messing around in his laboratory. That's my personal viewpoint. And I mean, I won't talk about some of the things the doctors did to try and fix him, but pigeon poo was involved.
Yeah.
as one of the things. And yeah, it's a very interesting program. If you're not squeamish and you can cope with seeing organs and everything else, it's a very, very interesting episode. But so he was a young
It's
guy.
funny. I can read about it. I can't
I know
watch it.
I'm
I mean, what
I'm
they
like,
did to
give me
him.
more. In fact, when my husband was going to have an operation on his ear, I asked if I could watch the operation, and the surgeon was like, yeah. But then when he got called away, the consultant got called away, and it was his registrar, and his registrar said, no, you'll pass out. And my husband was like, she really won't. She really won't pass out. I wasn't allowed to watch it. I was very disappointed. Anyway, but the interesting thing is, on his deathbed, he's said to have converted back to Catholicism, which I find really,
Yeah,
really interesting.
yeah. No, it's a again, it's another did he or didn't he
Mm,
moment of Charles's life, and we will never know because there is a suggestion, of course, that with his brother, with his heir being Catholic, that perhaps it might make that transition a little bit less scary if people thought, well, the king had been Catholic all
yeah.
these years and everything was fine, the whole world didn't end. So having a Catholic king, not so bad. But he may well have done it. So the reports that we have are from a gentleman called Thomas Bruce, who was the second Earl of Aylesbury, who was his groom of the stall. He was no, he was a gentleman of the bedchamber, so he was with Charles a lot of the time, and he was a fairly young man. And he said that on his deathbed, Charles had called for Father Huddlestone to be brought to him. And Father Huddlestone is important because he actually was involved in hiding the king
Yeah.
when he was on the run after the Battle of Worcester. So this is years before, when he's 21 and he's, running away from Cromwell's forces.
That
Father
when he hid
Huddlestone
in the oak
hides him.
tree. Is that in the period when he
He
hid
hid
in
in
the
the
oak
oak
tree?
tree.
Yeah.
He hid in the oak tree, which is why I have an oak tree tattoo.
Yeah.
Um, but that as soon as Father Huddlestone's brought in to the king on his deathbed, um, Thomas Bruce writes, as soon as the king saw the father come in, he cried out, you that saved my body is now come to save my soul. This is literally true on a Christian. That's what he wrote. That's what Thomas Bruce wrote. So the fact that it wasn't just some random priest. It wasn't like, fetch me a priest. I need to unburden my soul. The fact that it was someone who he kept around and someone that he had a regard for and someone that he trusted and loved, um, makes me think that that's a bit more Charles. That makes me think it did happen,
Mm.
but who
I would
knows?
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall with some people though when they heard
Can
that.
I ask him,
Especially,
Penny? This is what I want to know. Can I ask Charles? Where can I go and talk to him? Where can I summon
well, I'm going to come to that. I'm going to come to that. But
him?
wouldn't you have loved, with the fact that there was a conspiracy theory that it was the Catholics that had caused the Great Fire of London, having been bribed to do it by the Pope? Wouldn't you have loved to have been a fly on the wall with some of the very strict Protestants when they heard that their dearly departed king had converted to, if you like, their arch enemy on his deathbed, and got his last sort of fingers up? Where would you talk to? Well, funnily enough, there's not many ghost stories of Charles at all.
Oh,
One of the
boo.
interesting ones I found, I didn't mention this to you beforehand, was the Andrea McLean, the presenter, the Scottish presenter who used to do Loose Women.
Okay.
She reckons she saw him in her flat in London. But that's all the information I could
Oh,
find. I only found this out like yesterday, so I hadn't had time to contact Andrea to get the gist of the story. But she reckons she was sitting there having done yoga in her front room, and she said
yeah.
Charles II appeared in her room. And when she sort of turned back, he'd gone. Which,
Huh.
when you think of what she looks like, the dark hair, Scottish,
Okay.
wonder if
Oh,
she's a
you think it
Muslim.
might be a?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I'm actually going
interesting.
to follow up on this. I'm going to try and contact her about it. But the main
What I'd
one,
like to ask her though is, would she know Charles II from another gentleman wearing a periwig?
like you see, that's a whole different show, because this is one of the conversations I've
Mm,
had with people when they've said they've seen Henry VIII or Queen Elizabeth or whatever. And it's like, how do you know it was them? How do you not? Because people used to mimic the way they would dress, because it was like,
yeah.
it was like influencers now. The monarch was the influencer, the fashions of the monarch. It could have just been someone
Mm,
who mimicked their dress rather than them themselves. You don't know that for sure. But
yeah.
whether in the bigger interview she does actually, and that they didn't put in the article because it's not quite so dramatic that it looked like a
Yeah.
Cavalier type person, but she said it was Charles II. But it does make me wonder if she was distantly related to him. But
That's exciting.
the main place that he is meant to be seen is Ham House in
Okay.
Richmond Way.
Love.
He never owned it or anything, but the family that did were royalists who managed to keep their heads per se during the Civil War. Um, and the lady who owned it was a big supporter, and she was a member of the Sealed Knot Society.
Yeah. So this is the wife of the Duke of Lauderdale. Well,
Yes.
he's later after the Restoration he becomes the Duke of Lauderdale, and he's a part of a very influential group around the king, which were known as they were a cabal known as the Cabal because their initials spelt out Cabal. So it was Clifford, Arlington, Buckingham, Ashley, and Lauderdale. So
Wow.
he was incredibly close to the king. So the king would have visited Ham
Was he the
House.
one who was
I mean,
Charles I's whipping boy?
oh, I don't know. I like that though.
I'm
The
sure I
Earl of
read that
Lauderdale was a
someone
very
who was there, who lived in that house, was incredibly close to Charles I, and as kids was his whipping boy.
Oh, I'm gonna look that up. That sounds fabulous. He was a very big, very brash man. He
Yeah.
um he was tasked with looking after Scotland for the king, so he spent a lot of time up there, and he didn't
Mm,
he didn't take rebels kindly. He was a very yeah, he was a I think he had a rival at one point up there, and he dispatched him very quickly. He
okay.
was a tough guy, Lauderdale.
Well,
He was
Charles is meant to be seen walking in the gardens there, and
okay.
people have in the main hall have smelt his tobacco smoke. How they
Okay.
know it's his, I don't know because I've never actually experienced it. But yeah, that's the one kind of ghost story that I found about where
Yeah,
we could communicate with him. Although
that's very interesting.
there must be other places. I know that he was meant to have spent time at the ye old Black Cross in Bromsgrove when he was trying to escape. And he had his horse reshod there when he was disguising himself as somebody else. So that might be
Yeah,
one that warrants further investigation because that still exists. But it's
that'd be an
very few
interesting one.
stories of Charles. But then again, there's even less of his father, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And you'd think Charles the
I
First
mean, you'd think that,
would have
yeah,
wanted to
walking
come
around
back.
with his head,
Hmm,
perfect ghosts sort of sighting
exactly.
territory, isn't it?
Exactly. So we need to find somewhere that's not that well known that we can get in and we can see if Charles is actually around, if we can call him.
I tell you where I would go if I wanted somewhere that is fairly unchanged, and that's Boscobel House, the site of Royal Oak. So
Okay.
he spent time hiding there after the Battle of Worcester in September 1651, with a poor tenant farmer's family, the Penderells. And he would have been 21 when he was there, and he did a lot of kind of hiding and a lot of thinking there. Um, and I think he learned a lot about ordinary people there. I
Hmm.
mean, they asked him one night what he'd like for his supper, and he said that he would like some mutton, but he didn't realize that those families weren't families who ate meat every day. They couldn't afford it. So they actually had to go out and steal the sheep
Oh wow.
to feed him. Because if all of a sudden they were bringing a sheep home, people would say, hang on, something's going on there.
Hmm.
This is not the kind of family that would have mutton um, on
Wow.
a normal day. And he didn't, that sort of taught him, sort of seeing that happen and realizing that that was happening, taught him very much, gave him his common touch. I mean, we laugh about him having a common touch because,
Yeah.
he did like touching people. But he understood, I think he understood people,
More than his
and he
dad.
had some degree of empathy
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
perhaps his father and his brother didn't have. I'd love to know. I would love to be able to, yeah, to find him. But
Yeah.
I think that the fact that they were all bewigged in the way that they were and they dressed similar, I think it would take a very keen eye to know that that was him and not, say, another fine gentleman of the time in a black periwig.
It may depend if he was trying to get you into bed or not. That might be a idea that it was Charles.
Mate, I'm probably related in some way. I mean, look at this nose. This is a Stuart nose, if ever there was one.
Well, on that note, that really sensible, historically educational, intellectual note, what have you got going on at the moment?
What have I got going on at the moment?
You see, I know
Well,
the
it's
answer to
all,
this, which is why I'm laughing. Yeah.
yeah. It's all go at the moment. So I split my time between writing about Charles in the 17th century and presenting on History Hack and hosting a theatre and a travelling food festival, which is my summer job. So I'm about to hit the road with Foodies Festival. And we've got 13 dates this year, everywhere from Brighton up to Edinburgh. I'm going all over the country. So if you check out foodiesfestival.com, you can get tickets and come say hi to me. I'm in the Cake and Desserts Theatre every day, all day, every day. So you can come and say hello and talk to me about history or cake. I'll feed you. And yeah,
Yeah, you
it's
do
a good
get
fun
freebies.
place to hang out.
She gives away a
You get
cake
fun.
when she's made them, and they're very good.
Yeah, and if you come to Chelmsford, you might get to meet Penny as well.
Yeah, yes, 'cause I'm planning on going to the Chelmsford one, but they are all over the UK. And it's not
Yeah.
just one day. I think it's 3 days each place.
Yeah, 3 day weekends. Yeah. So yeah, all the details are on
And it's
foodiesfestival.com and
nothing but food and the smell. Oh, there's music as well. I mean, who's some
good
of the artists
music.
you've got? You've got Five, Sophie Ellis Bextor.
I know you're excited about
I
Five.
am
I'm
excited about
excited
Five.
because in Brighton we've got Martin Kemp coming to do his 80s disco. Yeah,
Whoa. You
no,
see,
I
I'm
have to behave
jealous. If
myself.
I could get down to Brighton,
Um,
I'd be there.
Yeah, we've got, I think it's Cardiff. We've got Craig Charles coming. We have Scouting for Girls. We've got, yeah, we get a lot of lovely 90s nostalgia, like you say, like Five, which is
Mm,
great fun. Um, and then there's local acts playing all day, unsigned bands.
yeah,
So come along and support them. That's really important.
yeah.
Yeah, it's good fun. You can also go to, if you go to restorationcake.com, you can get all the details about stuff that I'm up to everywhere across all of these mad things.
And go and follow her on social media and you get to see the outfits I've been telling you about because honestly, they are
Yeah.
exquisite.
There's no point dressing up if you can't get a nice photo of it and share
Oh,
it.
I'd say her wardrobe. Apart from the fact they wouldn't fit me, but um, I it's just and the stories behind a lot of the outfits, where they came from, and if someone's given her something, and she's the lady. She's the one to follow.
Bless you. Oh,
And
Penny.
what I haven't mentioned, we were talking music very much earlier. She plays the bass as well.
Yeah,
I
we're
think
starting a band, aren't we?
yeah, because I've got my drum kit next to me, so
Perfect.
I think we need to find. Well, I think we should be the girl historian band.
I think it's doable. A shout out to any other historical ladies who want to come and join our band.
Yeah.
Yeah, Penny, seriously, there's only one thing cooler than a girl who plays bass, and that's a girl who plays drums. So cool.
Well, originally a guitarist, then a vocalist, and now I've gone on to drums. So who knows? I just want to be a one woman band. I think is the
Perfect.
But yeah, we've got the rhythm section covered. We just need to find ourselves a guitarist or two and a vocalist, and we're there.
Perfect. They're out there. They're
They've got
definitely
to
out
be. They've got to be. Well, thank you so much for your time, my darling.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm just I could listen to you all day talking about this stuff because it's all learning for me and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So, but yeah, so do check out Restoration Cake. Check out Charlie's profile. I will tag stuff obviously on the Haunted Histories page. Do go to the Foodies Festival if you're in the UK. It's honestly the smell alone is worth it when you walk on there. And there's vegan, there's stuff for vegans, there's stuff for vegetarians, there's stuff for pescatarians, there's stuff for meat eaters, there's stuff if you just want to eat cake, there's cakes. If you want to learn
Yeah.
how to cook some fancy dish, there's there's exhibitions that teach you how to cook fancy stuff. There's
We got it
music.
all.
If you like a
There's
drink,
there's even drink.
there's
If you
drink.
just want to drink in the sunshine, we've
Yeah.
got that too.
Do you know what one of my favourite stalls was last time?
What was that?
Cheeses. The and we're talking cheeses that blow your brains off. Cheeses.
Lots of cheeses.
Oh,
Love them.
in fact, I think I bought one that was called Lancaster because there was a load of air.
Oh, boo. What's wrong with a good Yorkshire cheese?
I'll eat that too. But there was one that was called Lancaster, and I tried it, and it was kind of
Amazing.
whoa. There was definitely 4 Merlin engines involved in that one. Anyway,
Okay. Isn't it funny? That's where my head went straight away to
you
being
went
a
to
Yorkist.
Lancashire,
I'm like,
didn't
oh,
you?
Lancaster. I forget about, of course, the awesome plane. Yes. Okay, that's fair.
I wondered why you said about Yorkshire, and I was thinking, hang on, I'm a Yorkshire person. Of course, I love Yorkshire. I went to the Wensleydale Museum not so long ago, but I just realised where you thought Lancashire as opposed. No,
You went where
Lancaster
my,
is
my
in.
house went, the House of Lancaster.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there was. Even, I think there was a Spitfire cheese as well, but the Lancaster cheese was nicer.
that was a good one.
On that note, thank you ever so much, everyone, for listening to Haunted Histories, and I will be back very, very soon. Have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.